Welcome to the family, son.
Hello and welcome back to the channel. Here's everything I've picked out from the Resident Evil 9 showcase and some of my thoughts and theories. Let's get straight into it. At the start of the showcase, we see several newspaper articles describing what happened in the wake of the Raccoon City incident and the subsequent dissolvement of the Umbrella Corporation, as well as the criminal case brought against its founder, Oswell E. Spencer. But more interestingly, we have an article discussing the lockdown of the area being extended by the US government from 2026 to 2040. You can't read the end of the article, but it seems to insinuate it's for safety reasons. And considering that we've already seen an official, heavily redacted email sent directly to the White House regarding Elpis, leads me to believe that this was the bioweapon being created by Umbrella on behalf of the United States government. And with it being known that we will return to Raccoon City, I would hazard a guess that the lab which Elpis was being created still exists under the streets of Raccoon City, and Victor Gideon was the head researcher. But as we see here, when Leon comes across the email, Grace's photo is also seen on the screen. So what part does Grace play in a government conspiracy that's 3 decades old? My guess is her having daylight antibodies in her blood is the key to Victor Gideon finishing his work on Elpis. Yes, you read that right. The enemies are once again being referred to as zombies, and we got this straight from the lips of the game's director, Koshi Nakanishi. But these aren't your typical T-virus infected corpses, shambling around with no noticeable signs of intelligence. In Requiem, the zombies keep some of the memories of their life before their transformation, leaving them able to use tools and even speak rudimentary sentences. But outside of these basic signs of humanity, what else can we glean from what's on show? Well, later we see Grace create a hemolytic injector and kill a zombie with it. But what's more important is the item description. A special drug that destroys infected blood cells, prevents corpses from mutating, and can be used to stealthily take out enemies. It seems like we might have a similar situation to Crimson Heads in the remake of the first game. This time though, I don't think it will be a speed and aggression change in the zombie. I think much like with the G virus, damage will cause rapid cell growth, causing mutations, like we've already seen with the hag creature and this new creature we get from a shot at the end of the showcase, which I'm certain is the chef we saw previously. And this could explain what appear to be surgical scars all over Victor Gideon. Perhaps he's undergone massive surgeries to prevent the rapid growth of infection. Okay, so ever since Leon was announced in the previous trailer, everyone and their mum noticed he had an infected patch on his neck, and here we got to see some slightly clearer shots of that, but we also got a glimpse of a medical illustration right at the start with a circle drawn around the exact place where Leon has the infected lesion, with a handwritten note that appears to say black birthmark. And I really don't have a clue what that could mean outside of perhaps Victor Gideon being a bit poetic with his wording, like how he tells Grace that he hasn't kidnapped her, he's liberated her. But what I do know is, towards the end of the showcase in the section marked What is Elpis, Koshi Nakanishi said that Elpis hasn't been revealed yet, but Leon bears a secret related to Elpis, likely meaning that yes, he is infected, but also possibly meaning that he's feeling the burden of said secret as something that he must carry on his shoulders alone, possibly leading him to keep it a secret from Grace. We already knew that Leon and Grace's sections would play very differently, and both had their own preferred camera style, first person for Grace and third person for Leon. But now we've seen it in practice and have confirmation that the camera style can be changed at any time during gameplay and independently of each character, which is a really cool addition, especially after the less than stellar implementation in Village. But that's the least exciting thing we saw here, so let's move on to the good stuff. Leon's gameplay sections are frantic with high octane action, boasting new context-based melee attacks, kicking zombies against the wall, and following up with a skull-crushing blow or a devastating hatchet swing. As well as firearm-specific finishers, such as the close-quarter headshot we saw previously, and the newly showcased magnum and shotgun executions. and no button prompts were shown on screen for these finishers, so we're unsure how these are triggered, with the possibilities ranging from perfect dodges to them being automatic when an enemy is close enough and at low health. We'll just have to wait a little bit longer to find that one out, but it looks great. Parrying is also making a return, this time with Leon's new tactical hatchet, and as with previous titles, this will cost weapon durability, but in Requiem, Leon comes equipped with a sharpening stone to restore the durability on the fly. It's unsure whether this is a consumable, or if they've just refined the parry system to avoid having to use a merchant to fix the weapon. And finally, we've got Leon's ability to pick up weapons from downed foes. So far, we've only seen him using the chainsaw, but there could be other usable dropped weapons, as we've seen zombies using a meat cleaver and what looks to be a fire extinguisher or a wine bottle. But either way, seeing Leon finally get to use the chainsaw himself is something to behold. Right, let's move on to Grace's sections, and from what we've seen in both previous trailers and here, her sections are focused more heavily on stealth, with more attention paid towards resource management and avoiding combat. Here we can see Grace sneaking past a zombie on top of a dinner table, but as she passes, another emerges from underneath, and rather than engaging it and alerting more enemies, she leaves the room, possibly luring it away to deal with it in a quieter area to avoid being mobbed. Also, as I mentioned earlier, we got a glimpse in this showcase of Grace's ability to craft the hemolytic injectors using infected blood to create a powerful one-hit kill weapon if used in stealth. But we can also see other items that Grace can craft, such as ammo, mixed herbs, and the makeshift knife, which we actually get to see in this footage, giving off big Last of Us vibes being made from half a pair of scissors and some wrapped tape. We also found out that there would only be one campaign. And with Capcom's approach to the dual protagonist story being to move from tension to release, I think the differing gameplay styles of Grace and Leon can work really well together to keep the game from stagnating, because too much of either style could lead to it losing its impact, which is why I think the decision to actually make the game only have one campaign that's intertwined rather than two separate ones will work in its favour. Okay, so for the final section, let's have a little look at some of the guns we saw gameplay for, including the assault revolver that we now know is called the Requiem. But what real-world weapons are they based on? Well, the Requiem itself is based on the Russian-made RSH-12, which is chambered in a shortened 12.7x55 rifle cartridge, which explains its raw power. And on a side note, I'm betting the red rounds we saw in the teaser for the showcase are going to be some kind of hemolytic bullets. Other weapons we see Grace use are her mother's Sig Sauer P232 and a Beretta M1934, both of which are chambered in 380 auto. But also in the pre-order section, we see her sporting a modified Masterpiece Arms MPA-30 DMG 9mm, which I can only imagine has been converted into a full auto SMG. And as for Leon, we can see him using what we now know is called the Alligator Snapper, based on the Sig Sauer P320 pistol, which could be chambered in anything from 9mm to 357 SIG, 40 Smith & Wesson, 45 ACP or 10mm, so we'll just have to wait for that one. But next up we have a very familiar looking shotgun, which seems to be Ada's W870, which is based on the Serbu Firearms Super Shorty version of the Remington 870 12 gauge. And that's all we've seen so far, but I'm sure we'll get our hands on more when the game releases. And there we have it, the end of the video. Those are my takeaways from the Resident Evil Showcase. I'm sure I missed lots of stuff, so stick it down in the comments if you noticed something that I didn't. Like and subscribe, and please leave those comments. I love you all, and I'll see you on the next video.